A quick note on language. In this podcast, you may hear us use the term autistic, also known as identity first language. This is because many autistic adults feel that autism is an important part of their identity and not something that they need to separate from their own self-image. This is in keeping with the language in the Autism in Canada report. With that said, language is very personal. Some people and families of autistic persons prefer language such as person with autism, or on the spectrum, or other terms. The important thing is to simply ask the question of the person or of their family. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Learning Curve podcast with Edmonton Catholic Schools. Today we are so lucky to bring to you a special topic. This will be the first episode in a series of bonus episodes around autism and the learnings that we've been engaging in around autism in Edmonton Catholic Schools over the past 2 years. Today we are joined by Justin and Shamala, and I'll turn it over to them to introduce themselves.
I'm Shamala Manilall. I'm the manager for occupational therapy and mental health with Edmonton Catholic Schools. I've been with the division for 15 years, and I think we are privileged to be able to start working on an initiative for our autistic students.
And my name is Justin Duval. I'm the assistant manager for occupational therapy and mental health. Happy to be working alongside you, Sham. And I've been with the division for a little over 10 years, started in early learning, moved to the upper grades as an occupational therapist, supporting teachers and students in the classroom. Had a brief stint as well, a couple of years working with our students who are AAC users or augmentative and alternative communication users. And I'm excited to be involved in this project as well.
So my understanding is that there was a report shared with us, or a report that came out for Canada in May 2022. The CAOT shared a report on their website entitled Autism in Canada. Do you want to speak to us a bit more about that report and what its implications are for us in education?
Yeah, so CAOT is the Canadian Association of Occupational Therapy, and that is our go-to site for research and everything that's new and the latest evidence-based strategies and any information that we want about what's going on with OT within the country and worldwide. They shared this report, which was commissioned by the Public Health Agency of Canada, and the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences actually developed it and created it. The chairperson for this committee is actually from Edmonton, Dr. Lonnie Zwigenbaum, and he led this. And so it was released in May 2022 and is the beginning of a national autism strategy in Canada. They're working towards this with individuals who are autistic, researchers who are autistic, lots of agencies, other minority groups, people with lived experiences, families with autistic kids, family members who are autistic themselves. And so it's a very extensive document and really shares light on what autistic people would like from the rest of the community, from society, on how to support them, how to help them, and maybe view them in a different light, not as people who need to be changed or fixed, but looking at providing support in a different way.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing about this report. What are the implications of this report for Edmonton Catholic Schools?
Yeah, so this report was very much a first of its kind in Canada. The level of involvement that they had with autistic individuals and families across Canada, and bringing in research as well to make a very comprehensive document, supported us in understanding how perhaps we could take some of these ideas from this document and apply them in education. So just to give a quick run through, the key themes that came out in the report is the first one was intersectionality. The idea that autism is a facet of one's identity, but it also intersects with other facets of our identity. And other themes that came out were ones of social inclusion and how important that is to really target as we move forward as a society in how we are supporting autistic individuals to be included in employment later in life, to be comfortable in different settings and environments that meet their sensory needs. So looking at not just making changes for the individual person, but changes as a society so that they can be better included and belong. The third theme that came out were how we look at diagnosis, supports, and services for autistic individuals. And looking at it from a needs-based perspective rather than perhaps a perspective where one discipline is involved based on a single need. And finally, they also addressed economic inclusion and the idea that autistic adults are underemployed as a group. So there's a lot that we in education can do to not only support autistic individuals in building their skills, but also looking at the whole class who are future colleagues, future employers, and setting them up for success so that they can support neurodiversity in wherever they end up in their future.
Wonderful. And I can already see that this report aligns with ECSD's vision on supporting neurodiversity. Tell me more about how this is coming to life within our division.
So in the division provides professional development to all its staff members. And often the providers of professional development talk about how many different options we have and how to maybe tailor the professional development that we do provide. So it's a little bit more targeted, so it's not confusing to our participants and our members. And we thought about autism, talking about autism and teaching people and making them aware of our autistic students and their needs in our classrooms. So a group of us got together. The group is made up of multidisciplinary team members. We have inclusive consultants, speech and language pathology therapists, occupational therapists, emotional behavior specialists, and also curriculum consultants. We got together and went through the report and started an autism working group for the purposes of supporting our schools and communities. So we've been working for the last 2 years, meeting every second week for about an hour, going over things like how we bring awareness to changing our language, changing how we view activities and things that interest autistic people, looking more closely at their sensory preferences and needs and how we can take that back to the environment and make sure that there are no barriers in the environment that prevent people from learning or engaging, looking at how autistic students are making social connections with their peers. And so we've been working on all of those key areas over the last year, and we've created some nice tools, I would say, as a result.
Want to speak more about some of those tools coming out for teachers?
Yeah, so in addition to developing a common understanding of how our understandings were changed in terms of how we view autism, we were also reviewing resources that already existed to see what we could offer educators and schools who are looking to support their students. And so, one of the books that we did come across was Alyssa Lowery's book, Facilitating Evidence-Based Practice for Students with Autism. It includes a lot of evidence-based UDL strategies to support not only autistic students, but could be applied to a range of students. What we decided to do was we actually took the classroom observation tool as a framework, and we built over top of it so that we could include information from this Autism in Canada report. So, for example, some of the language we changed to be more neuroaffirming and more reflective of a strengths-based approach. We changed the tool from an observation tool that would be used by administrators to actually be a reflection tool that teachers can self-administer and look at and identify where they want to focus their efforts. We also added 2 key sections. One was on looking at student autonomy, and an important one to do with the theme of social inclusion of the Autism in Canada report. We added a section on peer acceptance and authentic relationships and supporting the teacher to reflect on how they can support those relationships in the classroom.
So it sounds like using research, this book by Alyssa Lowery and the working group and the polling of teachers, this reflection tool was developed, but I'm particularly interested in those 2 sections, student autonomy and peer acceptance and authentic relationships that you added to the tool. Why did you feel the need to add these sections?
A couple of reasons. One is that we've learned from the report that, a diagnosis is made. We follow criteria from the DSM-3. There's a medical team that makes a diagnosis, and an individual ends up with autism as a diagnosis, or that they are on the autism spectrum disorder. But we learnt from the report that that's not how autistic people want to be viewed. They see themselves as identifying with autism, not that it's something that hinders them or stops them from participating in society, just like everyone else. So that was the first thing we needed to become aware of, is they were saying very strongly that this is not an opportunity for others to fix, change, or medicate us. They don't want that. They're not saying they don't want help or support, but what they are saying is, can you look at us in a different way? We identify as autistic because this is something we are born with. This is natural to us. This is our neurology. We're going to have it forever. We can't get rid of it. No medication is going to take it away. But if you teach other people about it, if you make other people aware of it, there would be a better understanding of supports that can be put in place. So that was giving them a voice, giving them a chance to advocate for themselves, giving them a chance to start to build authentic relationships because other people understand who they are. So that was something that we thought was important, that we needed to make sure people know this, that the barriers could be coming from outside, not necessarily from the person, that we might be creating the barriers and therefore making it difficult for autistic people to function in a classroom or in society as a whole.
Yeah, and with regards to peer acceptance and authentic relationships, some of the interesting feedback that's come from a lot of autistic individuals, including research. One famous study done by Damien Milton, who is an autistic researcher, is that, in fact, some of our fundamental understandings from, for example, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Disorders may actually be flipping on its head. You know, this idea that autistic individuals have trouble with social cues and developing social skills. In fact, what some studies have found, including the work from Milton, is that non-autistic to non-autistic communication, there's typically, it's very clear, no breakdowns. Autistic to autistic person communication, there's also no breakdowns. Where the breakdowns happen is when you get these mixed types of communication styles. And so this then requires in the classroom for us to take a very conscious approach in teaching not just the autistic individual social skills, but actually looking at our entire class to say, these are some of the ways that some of our peers move, think, communicate in a different way, and these are all acceptable.
From what Shamala was saying, it's not necessary to change or to fix the autistic individual, but just understanding and reframing that mindset that not about changing or fixing, but it's about teaching and supporting and creating enabling conditions for all individuals in the classroom to interact with each other in an efficient way. So, tell me more about non-autistic to autistic communication. What are some of the issues that we're running into?
Yeah, so I mean, a common one would be, as an example, some of our students might use different ways to keep themselves regulated in the classroom. So an example would be a student begins to hum in the middle of a lesson. Well, a non-autistic person might interpret this as being disruptive or not appropriate at that time. So we need to teach the skill of being quiet, knowing when you can speak or make sounds, things like that. When in fact, we need to practice our own empathy when it comes to the autistic experience, that something may be going on that they are using strategies in order to self-regulate or communicate. So for humming, as an example, wow, I noticed that, the noise in the classroom is starting to build. I noticed that our student, whomever it might be, Justin, our student, is humming loudly. I wonder if we can bring the noise level down. I think the noise is becoming too much. So recognizing that we need to take some time for those of us who don't have that lived experience to put ourselves in their shoes and think, why is this happening? And what can we do to support them and create an environment that is easier for that student, rather than saying, I need to teach this student a skill so that they can fit themselves into the existing classroom.
I really like that. Create an environment where the student can have a place, and what a wonderful way to teach students about acceptance of all individuals. It sounds like I was interviewing Dr. Shelley Moore, and she was saying how much of it, how big of a gift it is to have diverse needs in the classroom, because you truly have an opportunity right in front of you to create that environment for acceptance and have those conversations to not fix the individual, but in which ways can we create an environment where they can belong.
I also wanted to talk about Associate Professor Sandy Hodgetts from the University of Alberta. So one of the things that the report had recommended is that we connect with researchers, with people with lived experience from the community, so that we can hear their story. And it's a very authentic story, and it makes sense when somebody's telling you their personal stories. So we were fortunate enough to be able to connect with two educators from the University of Alberta. One is Sandy Hodgetts, who's an associate professor in occupational therapy, and the other is Dr. Heather Brown in education. But Sandy had done some research with not just autistic students, with people, students registered at camps and with summer camps last year. And her research was around basically talking about autistic students and educating the rest of the campers about their autistic peer in the group. So she shared a very short story, which was probably less than a minute long, with all of the children. And then they observed the changes in interactions and social connections that were being made. And her research indicates that after they shared the stories, the social connections between these students or the children that were at camp happened quite naturally, because they understood what the vocalizations were. They understood that if an autistic kid was coming up to you and maybe touching or shaking or pushing, that they were perhaps saying, I would like to play. And that opened up many doors for the little ones to engage and start to ask questions. And suddenly that barrier was no longer there. And it didn't need an adult to help them build those connections. Once they understood, it just happened very organically. So her research is of great interest to us. We're very privileged to work with her, and we are going to try some of that within Edmonton Catholic Schools starting in January, in two of our schools in January.
Let's go back to the classroom reflection tool with the autism working group. I think this is a piece that our teachers may be most interested in, because it's a tool to kind of help in the practicality of understanding this report and how we can look and reflect on our own teaching practice.
Yeah, so this tool was developed based on universal design for learning principles. So while we focused on meeting the needs of autistic students in particular, the strategies themselves can be applied to any student or any classroom. So we worked as a group over the course of a year to whittle down exactly what content would be included, and broke it down into 5 sections at the end. The first is focused on environment, and in particular, three parts of the environment. The physical classroom itself, the physical aspect of the environment. So that could be, as an example, how we're laying out our furniture within the classroom so that there's very clear designated spaces for certain tasks. Making sure that there's labels on materials so that students know where to get the things they need. The second portion of the environment is looking at the sensory space organization itself. So, each classroom ideally would have a space that any child can take a moment to retreat, regulate themselves, and return to work, or just have a quieter space that they can work in. And then the third is on the visual supports that we include for the classroom. So this could be as simple as a classroom visual schedule that's on the board that is not only written down, but also includes pictures for our students who may not yet be reading. So ultimately, by focusing on the environment, we're acknowledging that disability does not just live in the person. It also arises from the way that we set up our classroom. We know that autistic people experience sensory differences, and we can respond by changing the environment so that it becomes a safer space, a more comfortable space for everyone. By including a space that students can regulate themselves in the classroom, we remove the barrier of some of that noise, clutter, other aspects that would normally get in the way of their learning. So the second section that we focused on was how to develop student autonomy. So this included thinking carefully about how we're supporting. At its essence, this is about thinking carefully about how we support students to be as independent as possible and reducing the amount of adult support that is needed through the day. So are we setting up, perhaps an individual visual schedule of the day so that they have a really clear idea of what to expect? Are we breaking down steps in a task within an activity? Are we giving them signals so that they know when transitions are coming and can prepare? These are all important, but we also need to think about our student as an individual. What are their likes and dislikes, their interests, and how can we use those as a bridge in academics in order to support them to access curriculum and engage in projects with their peers and things. So as a couple examples, if they love working with plasticine, can we have them make a diorama of the water cycle? If they love using the computer, can we work alongside them to create a book in PowerPoint? If they love to draw, can they do illustrations for a group project? So thinking about how can we leverage those strengths to be able to participate meaningfully. This third section that we focused on is around that peer acceptance and authentic relationships. And this, again, was based on that important conclusion that we need to look at educating our peers on neurodiversity and not just giving our autistic individuals tools that they can use. So in this section, we really focus on teaching those peers how the many ways that we move and we think and communicate in different ways that are no less valid than the ways that might be considered the norm. And so, ideally, we're taking the long view where these peers become friends, and then they eventually will become future colleagues, future employers. And when we're focusing on teaching at a young age, these are principles that they can then bring forward so that we can make some important changes that will have lasting impacts on the lifespan for some of our autistic students. The fourth section that we look at are instructional considerations. So these are these good in-the-moment teaching practices that a teacher may use when going through a lesson. So have they communicated the learning goals and the success criteria to the support staff and the students? Have they written it down on the board so that we have something to reference back to later? What sort of environmental supports might be needed to support the understanding for some of our students if we don't have, if we're finding that they're not hitting those learning goals? So for example, do we need to look at graphic organizers or templates or video modeling or other visuals? And again, how are adults actively participating alongside the student? Are they pre-teaching the concept? Are they coaching? Are they prompting them through an activity in a way that increases their independence? And then the last section looks at communication. So autistic individuals communicate in many ways. Some are very capable to be able to speak to and advocate for themselves. Others may be early on in their communication journey where they may be introduced to alternative and augmentative and alternative communication. So looking at how are we as adults providing that appropriate modeling and supports and opportunities for them to be able to use their communication tools so that they can contribute to the overall discussion. Some of our autistic students that we have in classrooms may have words but they don't always use it in a way that is immediately clear to the adults what they are communicating. As an example, they might use chunked phrases that may seem out of context. A child might hurt themselves in the past and remember that their parents said, "Oh, you need a Band-Aid," and then give that child a hug. Well, later, they might become upset because their favorite book is put away at the end of reading time at school. And in that moment, he cries and he says, "You need a Band-Aid." The association is not to getting a Band-Aid. The association is, I got comforted and I got a hug after this experience. So really what they're communicating using this chunked phrase is very different from the words. That's why it's really important for our teaching team to be very cognizant of when they hear these chunked phrases, that they still have a communicative function, and to be detectives as to what they might be asking for or looking for.
I heard you both say in one of the presentations you gave to Learning Services that if you've met an autistic individual, you've met an autistic individual, you've met one, and recognizing that there are diverse needs even within autistic individuals, but diverse needs within our students. And I really like this concept of UDL in line with a tool for autistic students, because sometimes the strategies that an autistic student needs are good for all. So even if you don't have any students with autism in your classroom, definitely take a moment to check out this tool. I think it's a great reflective piece to acknowledge that diversity we have in our learners and what are some of the things we can consider as we're moving forward. So for our listeners, we will have this reflection tool linked in the description for the podcast. I'll also have a link to the SharePoint with a ton more resources for you to delve through in support of autistic students in your classroom. So we're nearing the end of the episode, and a question I ask to all my guests is, what is a dream that you have for education?
A dream for education. It is a big question, but as an occupational therapist, we can work in many different fields. And my interest has always been in children, working with children, and especially those with special needs or a need for support that is different to what we refer to as our neurotypical students or children. But my dream is that, one day there will be just an easy flow between teaching practices and the different ways that children learn, because they are the future of our world and our communities and our societies. And if we teach them how to become adults that support other adults and support the growth of our communities, then we've done a good job. At the moment, I feel like it's a little disjointed, where we try very hard to put those supports in place for our young learners. But as they move up through the grades, supports start to fall away. By the time they get to university, it's even harder. And it just gets really difficult for that group of people who need different supports, who need different things to be completely functional and to do well in society, to actually make it happen when they're adults. And right now, it feels like we are, instead of removing barriers, we start to add on challenges, and it leads to other things. So we know for a fact that a lot of autistic people start to struggle with mental health challenges as they grow older. And I hope that those things can be reversed, that there will be enough of us to support our young students and to be able to empower them, give them the tools that they will hold for the rest of their lives to be successful.
So I'd connect it to two ideas. One is Maslow's hierarchy, and looking at this dream is already happening, right? Lots of teachers are already looking at ways that we can remove some of those obstacles that might happen on the lower portions of Maslow's hierarchy. Things like creating the space for if a student has not slept the night before, they can have space where they can rest and recover, or making sure that they are recognizing sensory differences and accommodating for those in their classroom, so that our kids can work their way up that pyramid and towards self-actualization. The other dream that I have, again, is happening in a lot of schools, but keeping in mind that safety, relationship, and belonging are very much at the foundation of what we do, particularly with students who may have more complex or higher support needs. They very much look to those relationships and safe people in order to stay regulated and grow and become who they want to be.
Amazing. I enjoy asking this question so much because we start to see a through line. It doesn't matter who I'm talking to, what their field of expertise is, but we're really in it for the student and seeing the student grow as an individual. So thanks so much for being on the podcast, Justin and Shamala. And for our listeners who felt that this episode was engaging and you want to hear more, stay tuned. It's the first of many to come. We'll actually have some interviews with some teachers who are going to speak to you about how they're approaching this in their classroom.